Welcome, everyone, to Rock M Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We've been here for 7 seasons now, at the beginning of Season 7. And we're here to talk all about your Missouri Tigers. I am your host. If you're watching us on YouTube, you will see me on the left-hand side, Sam Snelling. On the right, my co-host, Matthew J. Harris, all the way from Indianapolis, Indiana, beamed directly into your device here. Matt, how are you?
I'm well. I'm thrilled at last that we have a list of games to talk about, actual games to talk about. Instead of like cobbling this thing together and, keeping way too close of an eye on D1 docket, we have an actual honest to God non-conference schedule with dates and opponents. It was Christmas in late August. It's fantastic. I'm glad we have a real living, breathing non-conference schedule.
Right. And while we did know the bulk of, the dates and the teams, and, I feel like there's enough leaks at this point, like once contracts are finalized between like a lot of the high majors, like immediately like either Rothstein or Rocco Miller or somebody is tweeting out the details.
Yeah.
So we've known about like the major players on the roster. What we didn't know is like basically the nooks and crannies. How Mizzou is going to probably pick up the majority of their wins in non-con.
Yeah.
But basically, you and I, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the schedule. We're going to talk about it. We're going to see what this is about. And Matt, it starts off opening night against everybody's favorite SWAC team, the Arkansas Pine Bluff Lions, who have, I guess, year 3 of the Solomon Bozeman era.
Low.
And a lot of, I guess, after a lot, I think it was 13 seasons of George
Flyvery, baby. George Flyvery. But still going strong in the SWAC. Still SWACy, this time at Mississippi Valley State.
Yeah, he sat out for a season. He's at Mississippi Valley State. Some people may remember they played the Tigers pretty tough last year.
Yep.
So Arkansas Pine Bluff has not had a lot of success against the Tigers. I believe they played each other 5 times and have not won. The closest game, they only lost by 18 points. To what turned out to be the Lions' best team in school history. So I did actually learn a little bit as I was writing their preview. It's been a while since they've been in D1, and it's been a while since they've won the conference, and they won the conference. Fortunately for Missouri, a team when they had a really good team. Otherwise, that contest might have been a little tougher. But this is at the tail end of the Mike Anderson era when Mizzou was pretty darn good.
Yeah, they've, Solomon Bozeman's a guy who I covered a little bit when he was in college, University of Arkansas, Little Rock. His dad has coached at some D2s in state, really, really respected basketball family out of that state. Solomon's, been on some staffs, Oral Roberts and other places. He's a guy who knows basketball really well, high IQ guy, really good guy. UAPB is a tough job in that state, or like any SWAC position, it's really, really tough. But I think he's the right kind of hire for a place like that. Really knows the local basketball community, will understand how to identify guys, will have a good sense for the coaching community there. And last year, I think early on, they were pretty tough. They went to TCU and put a scare in that team. I think they only lost by 1. They played Oklahoma tough in a road game. They've, been in situations, I think, where on the right night, they can put a little bit of fear into people. I think they were really, really tough at Minnesota. Minnesota was awful, but they went in, they were in that game until very, very late. So I think if you look at what this team is, they play hard for him. He's great at identifying talent within that market. They're going to take a hit, like a lot of SWAC teams do. I think they've lost a couple of key pieces that you wrote, but I think, long-term he's the right fit there. But this is a game that, they've got to take to fill out the athletic budget. And if Missouri does what it should do, this should be a pretty comfortable opening night game for Missouri. But I think, long term, UAPB might be kind of a sneaky good team in a low major league if Solomon can do what he needs to do there and really gets the supporting that's sort of warranted for that position.
Yeah, there's no shortage of talent.
Floating around
in and around that area. There's some pretty good JUCOs.
Yeah.
In southern Missouri and Arkansas and even into Mississippi, where you can kind of pluck talent. And I think like there's a way where you can be consistently good. But the thing that I do like about like a guy like him at a job like that is essentially like that the program's going to give him a lot of time, and they're going to weather a good amount of tough seasons because they understand what they're up against financially, and that's why you go and you play like 5 or 6 high majors a season is basically to make ends meet, and so sometimes that makes your record look a little rough. But yeah. I think I agree with you. He's a guy who's he's got a good reputation. He's a grinder. Whether or not this is a competitive game, it remains to be seen. His first game of the season. It's one of those things like Missouri's going to be a new team trying to kind of figure things out, and it's entirely possible that this is a little closer than you might want it to be. But ultimately, I think it's a game that you could certainly expect Missouri should win with a reasonably comfortable margin. Probably not like 50 points like they did.
No,
they have 3 times against Pine Bluff. They beat them by 50 points.
Yeah, and that's the thing about you mentioned, the patience there. George Ivory got 13 years in that position. That administration understands the nature of the job. They know that Solo's going to have a rough night on nights like when they come into Columbia. So I think everyone kind of knows what the deal is here. And maybe they're able to keep it close. Maybe they're able to catch Missouri as they're trying to sort out some rotational issues. Like you said, put up a pretty respectable performance under the circumstances.
Next up is November 10th. Missouri welcomes Memphis to the building. Memphis has been in the news recently because they hired Brad Luce away from Mizzou, which I believe hit the national news market, not just our local one.
Yeah.
I'm teasing a bit. We love Brad. One of the great people. It's been in the athletic department after Kim Anderson left. Brad got into the sort of like fundraising side. Yeah. I was trying to be nice. And Brad stuck around and really like took advantage of Columbia's, I think, support for him, and obviously everybody remembers the Rally for Ryan stuff. Yeah. So cool to kind of see him take another step and get into maybe a little bit more of a senior role at Memphis. And Memphis is a cool town. But the Missouri Tigers are not going to take on Brad Luce. They're going to take on Penny Hardaway, who I did write in my preview. If anybody caught it or didn't catch it last week, Penny was always one of my favorite players to watch growing up. Obviously, as injuries sort of mounted a little bit, sort of took away a little bit of his explosiveness, but an absolute joy to watch when he was at the height of his athletic prowess. And it's been a little bit bumpier than I think a lot of people expected, Matt, at Memphis. But he's still done a really respectable job there. They've got a really nice looking roster. DeAndre Williams, if he gets approved for, I believe he would be 27 years old by the time college basketball tipped off this season.
Should be getting a fellowship in mid school.
Yeah, like if he doesn't have a some sort of leg up into the a doctorate program, like he's really kind of wasting his time a little bit. But a team that right now kind of looks like it is probably going to be one of the favorites in the AAC, and certainly a contender for an at-large NCAA berth. So this is no pushover. Memphis coming in, an experienced team to boot.
Yeah, I think there was a period, where it was sort of dicey as to what their transfer class was going to look like. But, a late pickup of Javon Quinterly, late pickup of David Jones, Jordan Brown, a really, really late pickup of, a player of the year and a former out of Louisiana and in the Sun Belt, but started out as a 5-star kid that sort of bopped around out west. Caleb Mills, a Florida State transfer. They've really gone in and with those 4 or 5 transfer pickups really sort of boosted, I think, kind of where the baseline roster and talent level is going to be. Even a guy like Jaquan Walton out of Wichita State is a guy who I think could start at a lot of AAC places. He's going to fight for minutes here. It's a pretty quality roster. I guess the question's going to be, what do they do with if Penny's not on the sideline? Penny faces a 3-game suspension to start the year. What does that look like, to have him out as you put that roster in? Now they do have everyone's favorite recruiter, Rick Stansbury, on staff. Rick, former head coach at Mississippi State, former head coach at Western Kentucky, could surely probably step in and fill the gap there. But a lot of new faces, a little bit of, tumult early on the sideline there. This is a game, though, that if you just went off Torvik's predictions for 2024, Memphis is number 31. Missouri is 63rd. It's a home game. It's early. Probably, falls in the toss-up category. If you're Missouri, this is an opportunity, I think, to get a quad 2 win at minimum, to get it early. And, if you look good in the process, it may portend, some big things for this roster. But 2 teams that lost a lot, that did a lot of an overhaul, it's one of those things where you and I can look at things on paper and sort of, try and speculate what it's going to be. But until we get closer to it, until we have a better sense for what the rosters are looking like, or we have a better sense for what's happening in camp, a little bit dicey. But this is probably one of those games that I think we're going to look back on and say this was one of those kind of linchpin games, in terms of what a resume might look like. So it comes early, it comes quick, but it'll be fascinating to see how this sort of plays out, with the dynamics we just talked about.
And really, a good amount of kind of what Memphis can really be does sort of hinge on whether Williams gets, granted another year. Now, his journey, and I wrote about it in the preview, and you can kind of look at it that way. But his journey to through all this has been an interesting one. So this would actually, if he were granted, I believe would be his 5th year playing. So it's not like he's played a million years.
Yeah,
he had a red shirt, he had a post grad, and it was just there's a reason why he's so old. But
yeah,
and I think he graduated late too, so because he was homeschooled there for a while. So it's one of those things where it's, there's a reason why he's 26 and about to turn 27 and still trying to play college basketball. But if he does get in, he's a guy who was really good for them last year, and certainly a tough rebounder and defender and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to, since we've got so many to get through, we don't want to spend too long on some of these, especially a team like SIUE. November 13th, that's a home game. I do really like what Brian Baroni, I'm assuming it's Baroni. Is it Baroni or Barone?
His dad, Tony Baroni, former head coach at Texas A&M.
That's right, Tony Baroni. I do really like the work that he's done there. I think when you look at sort of what he took over, SIUE has always been an awful program since they've tried to become a Division I team, and he's made them better. I think getting Rayshawn, just forgetting his name, Taylor, out of Collinsville, if I remember correctly, was a big move. And I think if he can consistently recruit those sort of lower level, D1 kids maybe pop up in the Metro East and convince them to stick around home. There's some really decent talent that kind of comes through O'Fallon, Illinois, and Edwardsville, and in Collinsville and Cahokia and all those places. So I think he's made an effort to kind of try to keep those guys. He has Javon Pickett's younger brother on the roster this year, and little Rob Thomas too.
Out of
was
CBC,
a guy that we both liked in high school, but he's a very, very small. I think it's kind of like one of those like Phil Pressey kind of things where he's like listed at something, and you're like, I don't think that's quite.
He and Brad Korn have really, I think, kind of figured out the model, which is one, you may not get, into that top 8, prospects out of the metro area, but you can certainly mine spots 8 to 15 and find those guys. If there's a guy that's, gone to a high major that maybe didn't have a great experience, you can offer a chance for him to come home and play, in sort of a market where he's familiar. And there's, some decent JUCOs, and, selectively, if you can work, into the Illinois JUCO system and into Southeast Missouri, you can sort of pick around and Baroni has sort of a background. He started in JUCO, so he knows how to sort of evaluate guys at that level. And the OVC is a league right now that's in flux. You don't have Murray there anymore. You don't have Belmont anymore. It's kind of Moorhead has kind of been that, third team in the mix there. But realistically, after that, it's pretty wide open. And so I think now is a good time if you can, find little pockets of talent locally and, really sort of, I think, build a steady roster and maintain some continuity at that level. The OVC's there for them to take. So it's a really, really, sort of nice moment for, SIUE to maybe elevate itself within that conference if it has a good sense of what it is and the kind of players that it's looking for.
So then that's on the 13th. Next up is November 16th. They actually make their first road trip. And I misspelled Minnesota. Or did I?
No, you got Minnesota right.
Okay.
You got Minnie right.
Yeah. So Minnesota, not the best Big Ten school. Been a bit of a rough stretch for the Golden Gophers here in the last few years. They had Richard Pitino there for a lot of years, and he was doing what I would call adequate work. And it turns out that he was doing pretty good work because they've really struggled since they jettisoned the younger Pitino. I think if you're lining up a high major for a road game and you want to take your shot, this isn't the worst way to go. Is find one of the programs that has really not found their footing and see if you can go steal a road win.
This is take Minnesota off the jersey. This is going to play at a mid-tier Missouri Valley team, like in terms of like what you're going to see in Evan Meyer and Kim Palm. So like that's really the functional quality we're looking at here. Drake is going to be better than Minnesota this year. The top of the Missouri Valley is going to be better than what Minnesota is right now. Doesn't mean that this should be a win that you automatically bank, but Missouri's right now, I'm looking at it, 69 spots ahead of Minnesota and Evan Maya.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you account for the difference on the road, that should be a win. I mean, even if you looked at where Minnesota's roster is right now, they're bringing back Dawson Garcia, who's a really nice player, but this offseason they lost Jamison Battle, transferred out to go to Ohio State. Talon Cooper, their veteran point guard, transferred out to go to South Carolina. They brought in Elijah Hawkins, who's a solid player from Howard, Mike Mitchell from Pepperdine, Jack Wilson from Washington State. There's just not an influx here, of guys that you look at the roster and say, this looks like a team that's, positioning itself to maybe make a move in the Big Ten. This feels like sort of a last stand for Ben Johnson there. Like I said, Dawson Garcia is back, but Talon Cooper is gone. He was second in usage for them. Jamison Battle is gone. Pharrell Payne, Joshua Ola-Joseph. They've got some guys who are young and going to be looking to step up, but there's not really, they were 330th in continuity last year. They're turning it over again. This is a long way of saying if Missouri is a team that you think is, should, even be in line for a 7 or 8 seed in the NCAA tournament, this is a game they win.
Yeah.
Functionally, this is playing a mid-major on the road. And that, again, that's dicey. We saw what happened when Missouri went to Liberty a couple of years ago. But if the roster is in a good place and if the staff has done what it needs to do, this should be a game that gets banked as a win. And, I feel for Ben Johnson. He's an alum.
They lobbied hard for the job.
Lobbied hard for the job.
Yeah, to get in position to even be in the discussion for that job.
And,
it hasn't gone well.
The pitch has been, what if we could keep these Minnesota kids home to play for us? And, there's more to it than that. And, it's time to call Nico Medved home. I think that's just where we are right now. Nico Medved, it's time to come home, Nico. Time to come home. But this should be, watch us jinx it, but this should be maybe not a comfortable win, but this should be a road win if both teams perform like we expect them to.
Yeah. So the next 3 games are more kind of lighter fare.
Aperitifs, you might say. That's a tasting menu.
Jackson State is another SWAC program.
But they got Deshaun Ruffin on the roster.
A guy who has not had a lot of success at Missouri. Really, Deshaun Ruffin hit campus in Oxford and turned the tide of the Tigers' futile efforts to overcome the Rebels. And I'm joking a little bit because Deshaun, I think Deshaun was a really, really good player, and then he's just dealt with a lot of
injuries,
and a guy who I thought was really going to help Ole Miss, and just could never kind of be healthy enough to do it. But maybe stepping back down into a lower level and just getting healthy was what he needs.
Yeah. Mo Williams is there. Jackson State, I'd have to look at the standings, but I think they were pretty good last year. This is a game
top
where
6, I think, if I remember correctly. I haven't fully gotten into Jacksonville State research yet, but
no, I haven't looked at this. These are games where Jackson State right now is 208 in the Torvik preseason. South Carolina State is 321. Loyola, Maryland is 262. We'll get to them. These are really where you start to tinker with your rotations. You start to give guys longer looks. These are the types of games, where last year, even a kid like Caleb Brown is getting 10, 12 minutes and not in like garbage time lineups. He's getting real minutes and a real opportunity to sort of put, a marker down. These are sometimes the games where, if I go back and watch, I'm really watching the backup lineups and really watching the young guys and seeing what they're doing. It's where we got our first really long sort of look at Aiden Shaw. We're in these types of games. So, for our purposes, it's sort of nice to see them as kind of the earliest sample of what young guys are maybe going to do to try and earn some time in maybe spots 7 to 10 in the rotation. Can some guy, maybe elbow out a transfer and get a role? So there's some utility there, but brass tacks, this is a stretch where you want to see Missouri go 3-0, and they should go 3-0.
Yeah, so Jackson State is on November 19th, and then on the 22nd, they take on South Carolina State. That is part of an MTE, which is a multi-team event. For people that don't know the MTE term, you probably hear us reference it a lot. The Maui Invitational is an MTE. The Battle for Atlantis is an MTE. And this is just a little MTE that Mizzou threw together so they could get an extra game.
Basically, yeah. This is, we can talk about it now. We can talk about it afterwards. When the schedule came out, I think our Slack thread and basically said, what's sort of the objective here? Yes, this setup gets you an extra game, but functionally, what are you doing with that extra game? Is that extra game allowing you to schedule Seton Hall? We don't know, but to me, I think the hard part here is when you do an MTE like this, you're booking 2 guaranteed wins as part of it, but are you helping your tournament resume necessarily out of it? Probably not. When I look at when these 2 games are on the schedule, they usually fall during Missouri's Thanksgiving break when students are gone. So are you going to
You're not playing in front of a packed house.
So are you maximizing the gate from that type of event? And, I feel awful saying this because I think, what Dennis Gates has done here, it'll fall to someone, when they get in front of the press to sort of ask what this is intentional. He scheduled 3 SWAC schools, 3 HBCUs, and wow. What's sort of interesting is 9 of Missouri's opponents here are led by a black head coach and, are all sort of the same age as Dennis. So is Dennis, consciously, and I think it's cool, is he giving opportunities, scheduling amongst his peers, is he, trying to support some institutions, sometimes that struggle, resource-wise. I don't know, but I think from the practical perspective, our 2 games against Jackson State, South Carolina State, the kind of game you need as you're putting together the schedule, or could you look at scheduling, maybe teams that are 30 or 40 spots ahead of them and still get the kind of reps you need and just do the nice incremental boost that will help you come March. Only the staff knows what those trade-offs are and, sort of what the philosophy is. But, it's hard for me when I look at an MTE setup like this to wonder, are you really maximizing what you're getting out of that kind of arrangement? Or at the end of the day, do fans just care about wins? It all sort of gets into the mix there, but I think it's sort of worth evaluating whether or not they're sort of leveraging that opportunity in a way that's fully beneficial. But again, we don't sit in staff meetings and don't run through the options.
So then November 25th, they take on Loyola. You'll see in parentheses there, it says MD. That's because this is Loyola from Maryland. They are a Patriot League member. Last year, they were not too good. They were 13-20, 7-11 in the Patriot League, which is not a great league. So this is, another game where I think you're probably expecting a sort of an easy Mizzou win.
Yeah, if you look back, they have not been higher than 214th in KenPom in the last decade. It's a bio win. It's if this thing is closer, 15 or 20, things probably haven't gone as smoothly. But then I say that last year Missouri was awful in garbage time. So
that's true.
I've probably damned them again.
That's entirely possible. But we can get a little excited about November 28th when the ACC and SEC Challenge kicks off. Missouri will be at University of Pittsburgh. Jeff Capel, the Panthers. There's I guess the main central love of our own Adine Rao. He is a big Pitt fan. Pitt made the NCAA tournament last year, which I feel like was a very important thing for Jeff Capel to do, because it had otherwise been a pretty bumpy ride for them, really, since he took over. They were kind of not all that impressive in the efficiency metrics. Mainly, they were winning a lot of games, a lot of close games. They were winning a lot of games in the ACC, which was really experiencing, or I guess still kind of is experiencing a bit of a down cycle. But they won 14 games in the league. which winning 14 games in the ACC should get you into the NCAA tournament, and it did. And so Missouri is going to have to go to Pitt, who Dior Johnson just left their team. He was a former 5-star recruit.
He had been suspended.
Bit of a troubled young man.
Yeah, he's had some issues on and off, mostly off the floor. This is a team that I think, really did a good job in the portal. I think that's sort of an underrated class because it's kind of a smaller class. But Ishmael Leggett, really good, kind of sneaky good player out of Rhode Island, transferred in. Zach Austin, a transfer from High Point, high-level athlete, jumbo wing.
Guy that we like to film on when we watched him after he entered the portal.
Yep, really good
Blake
player.
Hinson's back, right?
Blake Hinson's back for them. I can't remember if Nelly Cummings is back or if he was a grad transfer for them, but
the Diaz-Graham brothers are back.
Yeah, the Diaz-Grahams are back.
Very exciting.
They got some front court depth there. This is a team that right now I think is probably in 70s or 80s of Kim Palm and Evan Maya. They're in the same range as where Missouri's going to be. They're probably two similar teams in that they're going to have to replace some key cogs. But if the builds have been solid, they could be teams that you think are going to get on the bubble or maybe contend to get into the tournament. I know people aren't going to be really jazzed to see Pitt on the schedule, but this is a good game. This is a solid, quad 2 game. If Pitt's what we think they're going to be, it will hold some value over the course of the year. And, to me, this is probably the first true test on the schedule for them is, when Pitt is good, that building is really, really raucous.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a team that I think by then you want to start to see lineups and rotations starting to coalesce. You want to start to see kind of the identity of that team coming together. And it really is sort of the kickoff to, I think, a really, really, vital stretch in the non-con for this team. So I think it might be our first real litmus test of what this roster looks like. And if they go to Pitt and they get a win there, Wichita State at home is gettable. Kansas is going to be a tough road trip, but, you feel like if you can get a win at Pitt and maybe you picked off Memphis at home, you're starting to put together a pretty solid non-conference resume at that point. And maybe you've got some momentum that will carry you through December. But that feels like a game that, we're going to circle and say, okay, this is our first real good measuring stick of what Dennis Gates and the staff have.
Well, you already mentioned it. After that game, they do get a little bit of a break. December 3rd, they come home to play Wichita State.
Ronnie DeGray's homecoming.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the Ronnie DeGray Bowl. So anybody is paying attention this offseason, Ronnie DeGray, a guy who we've always liked and I always thought could be a very solid contributor, for Missouri. Never quite found a home once Conza Martin left. I think a transfer was inevitable, and he found himself at Wichita State. Yeah. And I think Chris Hollander initially took that job. He shortly thereafter, is he still on staff?
No, but he was on staff there.
Yeah. He initially took the assistant job and was working with them for a while, and then stepped away for personal reasons. We don't really know why. So Paul Mills gets a former Tiger on his initial run there in Wichita, and I really like the Paul Mills hire. I think he's a good fit there. I think he's really going to do good things. First year may be a little rocky, and I do think this is a game that Missouri should win.
It is, but it's going to be fascinating. I think they've got Jerome Pierre and Kenny Poto are still back. Those guys went in the portal. Not Jerome Pierre transferred down actually, but I think Kenny Poto went in the portal and came back. But he's a guy he's a really, really solid sort of like starter level big for them.
Yeah, because he was a guy we were kind of keeping tabs on. Once he went into the portal, it's like, well, maybe
if you need just a guy to soak up some minutes. But this is a roster where I think you could, if things go right and Paul's able to develop this team, they could be sneaky. Harlan Beverly is a kid that we followed out of high school. He was a guy that Missouri recruited heavily. He's a Detroit native. Cornell Mann recruited him. Didn't really ever break through at Miami, but he's coming back to the Midwest.
Yeah, he was always
downward.
a good rotational player for Miami, but never like a standout.
No, but it feels like, moving to the AAC, moving to a program that, where they're going to need, to refresh the lineup. He feels like a guy that could be a solid piece for them. He's more than adequate, to match what's needed in the AAC. Dallin Original was a guy that Missouri kicked the tires on out of JUCO, but ultimately wound up at Missouri State. He's coming in as sort of a backfill guy. Bijan Cortez, I think, was a borderline top 100 guy in the composite. Was at Oklahoma. Didn't really ever break through under Porter Moser, but he's going to go and he's going to play for Paul Mills. There's Ryan DeGray. Jacob Germany, a pretty sneaky good stretch big out of UTSA, is on that roster. The question's going to be depth for them. What do they have after maybe the top 5 or 6? But Beverly, Cortez, Germany and DeGray, right night, maybe they, get a little feisty on the road. We know Paul Mills runs great stuff. We know he gets his guys to play hard. I think what I like most about his system is that he teaches his guys to play basketball. It's a lot of 5 out. It's really simple, force the defense to help play off of it. It can be hard to scout. In some ways there's some overlap with what Missouri's going to want to do. And fun times, Connor Vanover gets to see his old coach too. So
yeah,
it's a night of reunions. Don't make sure you're there on December 3rd. It's just a night of reunions at Mizzou Arena. It's going to be fantastic. Tug at the heartstrings.
Speaking of heartstrings, next up on the docket is a trip to Fog Allen, everyone's favorite place to go play a basketball game. It is a great facility, and it is fun watching basketball games there. It's usually not fun when your team is trying to pull out a win.
Not the team you care about is involved.
So, a few things about KU. They are probably going to be the number 1 team in the preseason. They're going to be really good.
They're going to be a national title contender.
And we've seen, and I really kind of feel like Bill Self, I kind of feel like is making a statement by how badly he wants to whip Missouri and how much he wants to whip Missouri by. Like, I feel like he never wanted to play these games. I think the AD forced his hand because Kansas was a little worried that Self might be suspended and they may have to, be they may be playing without him for a year, may have to forfeit a national title or something. Something along those lines was going to impact some fan excitement. So let's get Missouri back on the docket because that'll put the bloodlust in all KU fans' eyes. But this is certainly not a game that you would expect a team, even at the height of Dennis Gates' powers. This is not a game you expect them to win. Frankly, I would really just like to see them be competitive for once against Kansas. It has not gone well the last couple times.
No, I just keep the margin under 20. Just look competent. I think that, clearly the first year of this, there was absolute bloodlust, and Bill would have run it up to 70 or 80 if he could have.
And that was also like a vastly overmatched.
It was vastly overmatched, blood vendetta from Bill. It was, that win has transpired. I think last year it
looked like the Tigers were a little sort of deer caught in the headlights
there,
and not quite ready for that moment.
And Bill Self had a week to get ready for that, which is, you can hate Kansas and acknowledge that Bill's really, really good. You give him a week to get ready, and he hates you.
Yeah,
it's gonna go poorly. This is a game, DeJuan Harris is back. DeJuan Harris is really good. Kevin McCullough's back. Kevin McCullough's really, really good. KJ Adams, is gonna be back playing as more of a natural 4 this year. And
Hunter Dickinson. We got Nick Timberlake,
Elmarco Jackson, a 5-star just hanging out on the bench. Johnny Furphy, one of the best international prospects, just hanging out on the bench. Parker Brown's sitting there. His whole family waiting to kill him in black and gold. It's going to be a challenge. Again, we're joking because in practical terms, keeping this thing respectable is going to be the goal. It's going to, if they...
Well, I would say keeping this thing respectable is going to be the goal or the hope of a lot of Mizzou fans. The goal for Missouri and Dennis Gates
going to be to win
and his team is to go in there and win. And that should be their goal. And really, like, the way that they play, if they're able to defend anything, which they weren't last year,
you got to tag rollers. You have to tag rollers,
right? Like, there's a world in which, this is a game where you can find a way to win. If you go in there, you shoot well. Like when Missouri shoots well, they're really good. So we'll see. I mean, we'll just see what these teams look like. That's December 9th. We don't know what any of the rotations are. The only thing we know right now is that Kansas is going to be really, really good. Missouri, there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered, hopefully, leading up to that game. And hopefully they do a lot of answering during that game.
I think the one thing that's helpful is that they're going to get, or probably a stiff road test at Pitt, and they're going to come home and maybe get a feisty Wichita State opponent. I think a contributing factor last year was that Missouri had a toughish road game at Wichita State, but they had not really seen, opponents that I think could really induce any stress. They're going to get Memphis at home early, and that team has some talent. That's a top 30 or 40 level team. Minnesota, maybe not there talent-wise, but it's a road game at a Power 5. Another road game at an NCAA tournament team in Pitt. I think the schedule, what I like about it is that it feels like there's a incremental stepping up of stress and sort of taxation as you go along. Last year, it really felt like they just jumped into an ice bath.
Right.
They were undefeated. They were coming off a really, really tough road win. Buildings packed. And they just looked overwhelmed that first 10 minutes against Kansas. I think the hope here is, too, that now you've got Caleb Grill. He's been to Fog. He knows what that atmosphere is like. You've got, a guy in Tamar Bates, who was recruited by Kansas, who's been in that building. Aiden Shaw's been recruited by Kansas, been in that building. You have guys who I think have a sense for what the rivalry is, for what that place is like. Nick Honor's played in tough buildings now. There are guys on this roster that I think are older, that are going to be mature, that are going to be able to understand what it means to go into that building and sort of what is waiting for them there. And there will have been some time for this roster to feel a little bit stretched and taxed. So that's the hope, is that, they're going to be just a little bit more callous before that game happens. And there's guys on this roster that remember what it was like just to get drummed last year, and they don't want to have that happen again. So that's the optimistic case going into this.
Well, so then they get basically a week off, and I
Lionel's week.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun matchup. Shaheen Holloway is taking over at Seton Hall. Last year was his first year, and I remember, you kind of mentioned earlier about a lot of the coaches that are coaching the teams that are on this non-conference schedule are African American head coaches, and it kind of reminds me of the article last year about all the black headed coaches who had this text chain, and they were all kind of on it together, and the guy. Holloway was one of the guys who was talking about it, and he talked about Dennis Gates kind of being on it, and so that's probably why this this game is on the schedule. Is let's play a game in Kansas City, and then we'll come maybe play somewhere in New York area, and get a good matchup against what is a very solid high major program in Seton Hall.
Yeah, they did some good work. Jaden Bediako, sneaky kind of good guy out of the portal for them. Elijah Hutchins Everett, sort of a rotational piece from Austin P. This is a team that I'm sort of curious what they look like, with a little bit of a refresh. Tyrese Samuel was a guy who I thought fit Seton Hall's culture and even kind of Shaheen's personality, really, really well. But he's transferred to Florida. Alexis Yetna was another kind of tough, rugged player that you think you would want in that type of program. He's transferred down to Fairfield. Trey Jackson, a guy that we know really, really well, has transferred out and gone back home to Michigan. Tay Davis, a guy that is from Indiana, who I saw play a little bit in high school, has gone back to Notre Dame. So I think it's interesting to see, these weren't necessarily all bottom of the roster type guys that left. So I'm sort of curious, what the reset looks like there in year 2. But this is a team that's probably going to be picked in the middle of the pack in the Big East. If you do that, you're in, say, a tournament team. Right now, Torvik, likes them at 53rd. Missouri is 63rd. This is technically a neutral site game. Another one of those games that, I think is going to probably wind up on the quad 1 or 2 cut line, depending on how teams perform. But, a really, really solid bit of scheduling there. And nice to see Missouri take the program back to Kansas City. It had been, I think it's been, 4 or 5 years since they've been in the Kansas City metro area. And really wish
the
hit that
Hall of Fame Classic
in 2019. 2019. Yeah.
2019-2020 season, I think.
Yeah. And they played Butler in Oklahoma in those games. Really would like them to get to the west side of the state more. We know bragging rights is going to give them an appearance in St. Louis every year. But taking the program west is really, really good. Next year they're going to be in the Hall of Fame Classic again. And I think the year after that, they're in Kansas City to play some of the back ends of the bragging right games. But it's nice to finally get a run. Border war games.
Yeah.
But it's nice to start getting a run of games for alumni on the west side of the state. So even setting aside, quality of opponent, it's nice to see the program get out and go west and give those fans a chance to have a short drive to see them.
So then we had bragging rights, December 22nd. Always fun. Illinois looks like they're going to be pretty good. We enjoyed how that went last year. I'm sure, Brad will be reminding his team what that was like to get drummed by this upstart Missouri team when Illinois was in the, what were they? They were top 25, but nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like we said last year. I think that Illinois team at the time had some loose bolts, and Missouri knocked them off.
I don't think they have a point guard, do they? I mean, I'm looking at it right here. I don't see a point guard. They've got.
Did they do a foreign trip?
They did a foreign trip, I think. And
I think I heard that Ty Rodgers was their point guard on the foreign trip.
Which
I can't imagine that going too well.
He was projected as a big wing coming out of high school.
Yeah,
that's.
He's
a great player. He and
Terrence Shannon have probably a lot in common, like physically and sort of like what the expectations were coming out of high school.
But they're not point guards.
No.
And they've got.
Just let Coleman Hawkins bring the ball up. That totally went well last time.
If you have good Coleman, it can go. I guess I like our friend CJ Moore. You know this. He and Sam Vecini have their top 25 pull out today. They've got Illinois at number 14 in the top 25.
Cool.
I mean, look,
I feel like that's giving Brett Underwood a lot of rope. And not to say that like so far in his in the last few years he hasn't earned some leeway there.
Like I like Mark, but I'll put it this way: I like Marcus Damas because I think he's a better fit for the play style there than Matthew Mayer was. But Matthew Mayer was a better player. Like Quincy Guerrier was a really, really well-touted recruit, went to Syracuse, was inconsistent, went to Oregon, was inconsistent. We think he's going to figure it out in spot number 3 now. I mean, Justin Harmon, nice player out of Utah Tech. Sincere Harris, had some little flashes for them, but, I liked Jaden Epps better for them as a freshman, and he went to Georgetown. He transferred to Georgetown. Monty Hansberry's a guy who looked really good, on the EYBL at times, but, Luke Goody didn't really get to play at all last year. I mean, I don't know if they have the same level of shooting that they've had. I don't know if they have a point guard. And, oh, by the way, I think that team hated each other for long stretches last year. Chemistry was not good. Like, I guess I could see this being a top 15 team if everything goes right, but they have a ball handler, they have enough shooting, and, I know Terrence Shannon's going to be good. I know Coleman Hawkins can be good. I like Ty Rogers' ceiling, but everything else feels just like
maybe.
And watch us say that, and then they'll absolutely get vengeance and hammer Mizzou. But I don't know. The computers are going to like him. I think AP voters will probably put him in the top 20. I'm a little skeptical, but hey, could be a quad 1 win if you get it. So let's hope they're just good enough to be quad 1 and have a bad night.
Well, and there is a little bit of truth to that. I mean, like last year, Missouri, beat the pants off them, but there was, one point, what was it after? So Missouri beat them, and then they lost to Northwestern, and then they won 7 of 8 games, something like that.
Yeah.
And looked like they were putting it all together. But, the Big Ten's a rugged league, and
this beats the crap out of each other.
Yeah. It's that sometimes, you go on the road. It's the same thing in the SEC is just you have one stretch where you look great, and then you have another stretch and oh, why are they losing all these games? Well, they lost on the road at Iowa, they lost on the road at Penn State, they lost on the road at Indiana. 3 NCAA tournament teams.
Yeah.
And that's how it is in the SEC as well. It's Missouri gets hammered by Texas A&M. What's wrong with Missouri? Well, Texas A&M is really good.
Yeah. Overall, though, this is, we can do a kind of a wrap up on the whole schedule, but I really,
Matt, you don't want to talk about Central Arkansas?
Conway, baby.
I'm gonna because it's here ready to go. December 30th, Central Arkansas.
It's great little way to wrap up the year. Again,
I feel like Kim Anderson always did that, right? He always scheduled, the absolute worst team in their schedule was when
nobody's around.
The game right before you start conference play. And I remember there were some absolute drubbings of some terrible teams by another terrible team. Central Arkansas, that's they've had a rough stretch as a program for a lot of years.
I like UAPB's future more than I like UCA's future. I'll just say that much. I think UAPB's got a coach that could actually, lead them someplace in their conference. I'm not sure about UCA and the ASUN, but hopefully you should bank that win. Again, this is a schedule that is modestly improved over last year. Modestly. Feel like the top of the schedule, if you were to average their Torvik and Kimpom ratings here, they're better by about 10 spots. Essentially the same as it was a year ago at the top end. Difference is they, maybe they scheduled 3 teams that won't end up sub 300 or sub 250 if things go right.
Yeah,
maybe.
Well, and I think another thing that you're kind of hoping is that your depth is better this year to shore up, like we were talking about earlier, the garbage time minutes. If Missouri was better in garbage time last year, they're probably more likely at top 35 5-ish, team, maybe top 40, definitely top 40, but
definitely top 40 probably. If they're top 40, they're probably on the 6th line.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the difference between, like I brought it up in my preview of SIUE about how SIUE the last quarter of the game
they
outscored Missouri by 15 points. And it's like Missouri was up by like 40 in that game. Like it was not a contest, and then they came back and only lost by 25. But
it's like we say, every possession counts.
That's the difference a lot of times.
And I get when fans say, all that should matter is winning and losing, and what your overall resume says. And to me, it's like, well, no, every possession counts. If every other team that you think Missouri should be seated ahead of didn't let the rope slip.
Yeah,
they handled their business. Missouri didn't. And if you are judging, like if you believe that you should seed based on merit and on the body of work, quads, we also agree are sort of a stupid construction, but if you are applying that and 4 or 5 other teams perform better against those opponents, they should be rewarded for it. And Missouri didn't. If you look at MI, they grossly underperformed. They're probably one of the worst high major teams in garbage time last year, and that may not matter in 1 game or 2 games. To do it 4, 5, 6 games,
which they did.
It adds up. So I think you hope, this team is able to handle its business and do what it needs to do. And, I think there are 8 or 9 wins at a minimum here. But what do those wins look like? What does the body of work look like? We'll see. But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is I think they structured this schedule a little bit better than a year ago. Last year just felt like you went from 0 to 60. This feels like there's a little bit more of, incremental sort of and stepwise progression. But, where do you think the swing games are? Is it Memphis? Is it Pitt? Is it Seton Hall? Are those
I'd
three
say Memphis, Pitt, Seton Hall, and Illinois are probably the 4.
Yeah. You expect a home win over Wichita State, road loss at Kansas. If you can split, you expect a road win at Minnesota, probably. Yeah, if you get a split out of that and you get to 10-3, I think that's probably the best result. Not the best result, but that's probably one that I think would tee you up for some pretty good success in conference play when it gets here. But we'll see.
Well, so that's the schedule. Not a lot else is happening. I do a little bit of news. Annor Boateng, everybody's favorite borderline 5-star recruit, finished his visit and
has another one scheduled.
I guess, yeah. It's people were making a big deal that our friend at Mizzou, Gabe Yarman, submitted a future cast or whatever they call it at Rivals. Picked for Boateng to end up at Mizzou. If you've been paying attention to our podcast, I'd say we've always felt that the momentum was helpful towards Boateng to maybe have the Tigers as the favorite. I would not enter in a pick at this point. Yeah. He still has scheduled a visit to Indiana. If he cancels that, I say log your pick.
Yeah.
But let's let the family see Bloomington. It's a cute little campus. The fans are rabid about the Hoosiers. But ultimately, we hope and think this is something that could end up with him becoming a Tiger.
Yeah, would be Arkansas fans would say they were being gracious and just letting Missouri have him. That's what Arkansas fans will say. That Muss was being kind and philanthropically minded by letting Missouri go.
Well, and they were on the other guys who they think are better. So they couldn't take a commitment from Boateng because they got to wait on this other guy. And if Boateng wants to commit, then he wants to commit, and that's how it is.
Which is just stunning to me. Like Arkansas's the whole thing is guys don't leave. Like, and when they leave, they only go to Kentucky. Like that is the mentality of that fan base. But Jalen Shelley out of Houston is the guy they really want, not the 5-star out of Little Rock Central, not that guy. But still worth monitoring. Really, really fascinating. If you can go in, regardless of what Arkansas fans will say, still impressive to go in and potentially extract a kid out of Little Rock Central who's a 5-star talent. Would be exceptionally rare for them, no matter what sort of frame they want to put on it. But we'll see. Those pesky Hoosiers still lurk.
And we're still monitoring Jaden Quaintance. We'll see what happens there. The visit happens in September. He's also scheduled to go see Ohio State and Kentucky in October. If I remember correctly. And
keep an eye on the G League too.
Yeah, like he's. If you're reading all the tea leaves, following the breadcrumbs, it seems to be a potential situation where whoever is the highest bidder can probably get this kid on their campus, and maybe that's the G League. We'll see. I think Missouri's in a good spot right now. That NIL law is working in their favor. And credit to Mizzou boosters because apparently they're stepping up and making this competitive. So that's all I got to say about Quaintance. As the visit gets closer, hopefully there'll be more information unearthed, and we'll have more to talk about at that point. But that's all I've got, Matthew.
That's all I've got. We had live actual basketball to talk about, or a schedule to talk about. So I'll take that. It just, what is it, 10 weeks till tip?
10 weeks.
Closing in. But nope, I've got everything.
One last thing before we get out of here, sir. And I have to say, attention, sports fans.
God.
Are you a fan of an NFL team? Would you love to attend your favorite team's Week 1 game? Well, you're in luck. Fans First Sports Network is giving away 4 free tickets to Week 1 NFL game of your choice up to $5,000. The rules to enter are simple. You go to contest.fansfirstsports.com. I will say that again. Contest.fansfirstsports.com and fill out the appropriate information. There's a little thing that you just fill out right there. That's it. Once you've done that, you've officially been registered to enter to win these 4 free tickets to any Week 1 NFL game. So what are you waiting for? Matt, you going to do it? You going to go check out the Colts or maybe travel to see the Chiefs?
I can get some free tickets to work.
Go enter for your shot at seeing your favorite team in action. I'm assuming we have some NFL fans who listen to this podcast as well. The contest does end up September 4th, so if for any reason you're listening to this on September 5th, you are too late. But if you're listening to it before that, head over there, enter. What's the worst that could happen? You could end up with $5,000 worth of tickets and travel to see your favorite NFL team.
There are worse problems to have, I suppose.
I actually legitimately think that's cool. Like there's nothing else you have to do. Like Fans for Sports Network is who we're affiliated with now. They help us publish this pod. They help us with this software and all the stuff that we have to run to make it look kind of nice. So I thank them. I think this is a cool thing. Go sign up.
Go ahead, folks.
That's it. So I think you're probably gonna take at least a couple weeks off. I'm still trying to kind of set up some interviews. We've had some people kind of had to push things. So we didn't get anything last week, which wasn't all the worst thing. It was nice to kind of have a day off. But we will have some more people coming in to talk on this here podcast. So stay tuned. Before the box score, Matt is going live tomorrow night. So this is Monday night, August 28th. Tuesday night, August 29th, you can watch Nate and BK live on YouTube, which will be embedded into the Rock M Nation website as well. So go check that out. That's it for us. We're out of here. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.